The morning sky over Seoul was the wrong color. Instead of blue, it glowed with an orange hue that made everything look sick. Dr. Kim Hwan stood on the roof of the emergency medical center and watched the alien ships descend through the poisoned air. The ships were beautiful. They looked like they were made of crystal and light. They moved without sound, drifting down like falling stars. For 3 days now, these ships had been arriving all over Earth. The news called them Velkans. Hwan had been working for 36 hours straight. His white coat was stained with blood and sweat. His hands shook from too much coffee and too little sleep. Around him, the city that had once been home to 10 million people was mostly empty now. The plague had taken most of them. It started 6 months ago in the farming areas outside the city. At first, doctors thought it was just a new kind of flu. People got sick for a few days and then got better. But then they started dying. Not just people, everything. Plants, animals, even the bacteria in the soil. The plague ate through living things like acid through paper. The worst part was how smart it was. Every time scientists thought they had found a cure, the plague changed. It learned from their attempts to stop it. It grew stronger with each victory. Now the Velkans were here, and Hwan did not know if that was good news or bad news. A soft chime sounded behind him. He turned to see one of the crystal beings floating up through the stairwell. It had no legs, just a smooth body that tapered to a point. Where a human would have a face, there was only a collection of moving lights. Dr. Kim Hwan, the alien, said. The voice came from a small device attached to Hwan's belt. The words sounded strange, like music turned into speech. I am Ambassador Kreltan of the Velkan Collective. We need to talk. Hwan nodded. He had been expecting this. As head of the Seoul Medical Emergency Council, he was one of the few human authorities left in the region. How bad is it? Hwan asked. He already knew the answer would be terrible, but he needed to hear it. The Velkans' lights shifted, and what Hwan had learned was their version of sadness. Your species has perhaps 60 days remaining. The plague will consume all complex life on this planet within that time frame. 60 days. Hwan felt his knees go weak. He had hoped for longer. The other emergency councils around the world had been working on evacuation plans, but they all assumed they had months to prepare. However, Kreltan continued, we have come to offer assistance. They moved inside, down to the conference room, where the other council members waited. Park Min-ho, the engineer, sat at the far end of the table with his laptop open. Lee Yuna, their best biologist, was studying readouts from the plague samples. Choi Dae-ho, their physicist, looked like he had not slept in a week. Kreltan floated to the center of the room. More lights appeared along its body, creating patterns that somehow made everyone feel calmer. We have been monitoring your world since the plague began, the Velkan explained. This weapon was created by a coalition of species called the hegemony. They use it to clear worlds for their own use. Weapon? Yuna looked up from her samples. You mean this was done on purpose? Yes. The plague is not natural. It is a designed organism with artificial intelligence. That is why it adapts so quickly to your countermeasures. Minho slammed his laptop shut. Those bastards. They're killing our entire planet just to make room for themselves. The hegemony has done this to 47 worlds in the past century, Kreltan said. We have been able to save some populations by evacuation, but never an entire species. Dae-ho leaned forward. What are you proposing? The Velkan's lights dimmed, which Hwan was starting to recognize as a sign of serious concentration. We can take 50,000 of your people to safety. Our ships can carry them to worlds within our territory where they can rebuild. The number hit the room like a physical blow. 50,000 out of the 3 billion humans still alive. That's it? Minho's voice was barely a whisper. 50,000. It is the maximum our evacuation fleet can handle while maintaining safety. Protocols, Kreltan replied. The plague can spread through biological material. We cannot risk carrying more without contaminating our home worlds. Yuna was doing math on her tablet. That's less than 1% of the survivors. How do we choose who lives and who dies? We would suggest selecting for genetic diversity and essential skills, the Velkin said. Scientists, engineers, medical, personnel, teachers, young healthy individuals who can bear children. The room fell silent. Outside, they could hear the distant sound of the city's emergency broadcast system playing the same message over and over. Remain indoors, conserve food and water, help is coming. But help was not coming, not for everyone. Juan looked around the table at his colleagues. These were good people, smart people. They had worked without rest to try to save their world. And now they were being asked to decide which tiny fraction of humanity deserved to continue existing. How long do we have to decide? He asked. 14 days, Kreltan answered. After that, the plague will have spread too far for safe evacuation. Even we cannot guarantee passage through contaminated space. The Velkin began to float towards. The door then paused. Dr. Juan, I want you to know that this decision was not made lightly. The collective debated for days about whether to attempt any rescue at all. Many argued that the risk to our own people was too great. But you came anyway, Deho said. Yes, because we believe that every intelligent species deserves a chance to continue, even if that chance is small. After the alien left, the 4 humans sat in silence. The weight of the choice ahead of them pressed down like a physical thing. Outside, the orange sky was growing darker as the plague consumed more of the atmosphere's natural chemistry. We need to contact the other councils, Juan finally said. Get lists of candidates. Start making the selection process. And if we can't choose? Yuna asked. If we can't bring ourselves to condemn billions to die? Then we all die together, Minho replied. And humanity ends on this poisoned rock. But even as he said it, Juan could see something else in his colleague's eyes. A spark that had not been there before the Velkins arrived. It was not hope exactly, but it was not despair either. It was determination. The plague might be smart, but humans had something it did not. They had the ability to sacrifice for others, to give up everything for the slim chance that some part of their species might survive. And sometimes, that was enough. Dr. Lee Yuna had not seen sunlight in 5 days. The underground laboratory beneath the old university was lit only by the soft blue glow of Velkin medical equipment. The aliens had given them access to some of their technology to help with the selection process, but Yuna was using it for something else entirely. She was trying to understand the plague. The samples floated in containment fields that hummed with alien energy. Each one looked like a drop of oil mixed with starlight. They moved with purpose, even in isolation. They were searching for something to consume, something to change, something to learn from. Any progress? Park Minho asked as he climbed down the metal stairs into the lab. He carried a steaming cup of what passed for coffee these days. Real coffee had become impossible to grow since the plague reached the farming regions. Maybe, Yuna replied without looking up from her microscope. I think I know why it adapts so quickly. She gestured to the display screen beside her workstation. Lines of data scrolled past in patterns that looked almost like music. The plague does not just attack living things. It reads them first. It scans their genetic code, their cellular structure, their defense mechanisms. Then it creates the perfect weapon for that specific target. Minho set down his coffee and studied the data. As an engineer, he understood systems and processes. So it's like a lock that changes its shape to fit whatever key tries to open it. Exactly. But here's the interesting part. Yuna manipulated the display to show a different pattern. It has to store all that information somewhere. Every adaptation, every successful attack, every bit of biological data it collects. There has to be some kind of memory system. A brain, Minho said slowly. More like a computer. A biological computer that thinks and learns and remembers. Yuna finally looked up from her work. Her eyes were red from strain and lack of sleep. And computers can be hacked. The idea hung in the air between them like something dangerous. They both knew what she was suggesting. Instead of running from the plague, instead of accepting the Velkin's rescue offer, they could try to fight it directly. That's insane, Minho said. But he was already thinking about how it might work. That was the problem with engineers. Show them an impossible challenge and they started designing solutions. Is it more insane than choosing 50,000 people to live while everyone else dies? Yuna asked. Before Minho could answer, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Dr. Choi Daeho appeared, followed by Dr. Kim Hwan. Both men looked exhausted. They had been working with the other regional councils to create lists of evacuation candidates. It was not going well. The councils in Europe are refusing to cooperate, Hwan announced. They want to select people based on political connections rather than scientific criteria. The American councils want to hold a lottery. The African councils have stopped responding to our messages entirely. Daeho slumped into a chair beside Yuna's workstation. We have 12 days left to choose 50,000 people, and we cannot even agree on how to make the choice. Maybe we don't have to choose, Yuna said quietly. She explained her discovery about the plague's memory system. As she talked, she could see the same spark in their eyes that she had felt when she first realized what she was looking at. It was the spark of people who had found a problem they might actually be able to solve. You're talking about reprogramming it, Daeho said, turning its own intelligence against itself. The principle is sound, Minho added. If we can access its memory core, we might be able to introduce false data, make it think it's encountering threats that don't exist. Hwan was the voice of caution. And if we're wrong, if we try this and fail, we lose our chance at the evacuation. Everyone dies. Everyone is already dying, Yuna pointed out. At least this way, we have a chance to save everyone instead of just a few. They spent the next hour going through the technical challenges. The plague's computer system was unlike anything humans had ever encountered. It operated on quantum principles that Earth science was only beginning to understand. They would need processing power beyond anything their surviving technology could provide. What about the Vulcan medical stations? Daeho suggested. They're quantum-based systems. If we could network them together. The Vulcans would never agree to that, Hwan said. They're here to help us evacuate, not to risk their equipment on a desperate experiment. But Yuna was already working on her tablet, running calculations. Actually, they might. Look at this. She showed them a map of the plague's spread patterns across Earth. Red zones marked areas where the biological weapon had achieved total success. Yellow zones showed regions where it was still adapting to local conditions. The plague isn't just killing us, she explained. It's learning from us. Every genetic pattern it encounters, every biological defense it overcomes, all of that data gets stored in its memory. Minho understood first. It's building a database. Exactly. And when it's finished with Earth, that database gets transmitted somewhere else. To the next world the hegemony wants to attack. The implications hit them all at once. The plague was not just a weapon. It was a learning tool. Every world it destroyed made it more effective against the next target. The Vulcans need to know about this, Hwan said. If we're right, then saving 50,000 humans is not enough. The plague will just move on to the next world, and it will be even deadlier because of what it learned here. They worked through the rest of the day, refining their theory and gathering evidence. As evening approached, they prepared to present their findings to Ambassador Kreltan. The Vulcan arrived at sunset, floating down through the laboratory's main entrance with the same graceful silence that marked all of their movements. The lights, along its crystalline body, pulsed in patterns that Yuna had learned indicated curiosity, mixed with concern. You have requested an urgent meeting, Kreltan said through the translation device. What have you discovered? Yuna stepped forward, her tablet held in steady hands despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. We think we know how to stop the plague, but we're going to need your help. She began to explain their theory, watching as the aliens' light patterns shifted from curiosity to surprise to something that might have been excitement. When she finished, the laboratory fell silent except for the quiet hum of alien technology. Finally, Kreltan spoke. If you are correct, this changes everything. The hegemony has been using this weapon for decades. Worlds beyond counting have fallen to it. That's why we have to try, Yuna said. Not just for us, but for everyone else they plan to attack. The Velkin floated closer, its lights now pulsing with rapid, complex patterns. What you propose is extremely dangerous. If you fail, both our species could be at risk. And if we do nothing, Juan added, the killing continues until there's no one left to save. Kreltan was quiet for a long moment. Then the aliens' lights shifted to patterns none of them had seen before, patterns that somehow conveyed both hope and determination. I will present your proposal to the collective, the Velkin said. They will need to vote on whether to risk our technology on such an attempt. How long will that take? Minho asked. 3 days. They all looked at each other. 3 days out, of their remaining 12. If the Velkin said no, they would have barely enough time to complete the evacuation, but if the Velkin said yes, they might be able to do something that had never been done before. They might be able to save not just their own world, but countless others that the hegemony had marked for destruction. The choice was no longer between 50,000 survivors and total extinction. It was between certain salvation for a few and possible salvation for everyone. The Velkin flagship looked like a city made of crystal floating in space. Ambassador Kreltan moved through its corridors with urgent purpose, heading toward the council chamber, where the fate of 2 species would be decided. The ship held over 10,000 Velkins, each one a specialist in some field of science or medicine. They had come to Earth expecting a simple evacuation mission. Now they faced a choice that could change the course of galactic history. The council chamber was vast, its walls alive with flowing patterns of light that reflected the thoughts and emotions of every Velkin aboard the ship. As Kreltan entered, the patterns shifted to show concern, curiosity, and fear in equal measure. Elder Velthara waited at the center of the chamber. The Elder was ancient even by Velkan standards, old enough to remember when their species first learned to travel between stars. The light patterns along Velthara's crystalline body moved slowly, like deep ocean currents. Present the human proposal, the Elder commanded. Kreltan activated the holographic display system. Images appeared in the air showing the plague's structure, its learning patterns, and the human's theoretical solution. The other council members gathered around, their own light patterns creating a symphony of analytical thought. The humans believe they can reprogram the plague's memory core, Kreltan explained, turn its own intelligence against itself. But they need our quantum medical cores to provide the processing power. Velnox, the youngest council member, pulsed with skeptical energy. This has never been attempted. We would be risking our most advanced technology on an unproven theory. The risk is considerable, agreed Mextara, the fleet's chief medical officer. If the plague corrupts our systems, we lose the ability to help other worlds facing similar attacks. But Kreltan was prepared for these objections. The display changed to show something the humans had discovered in their final hours of research. It was a star chart marking worlds that had been attacked by the plague over the past century. Look at the pattern, Kreltan said. Each attack is more successful than the last. The plague learns from every world it destroys. It builds a database of genetic patterns, biological defenses, and adaptation strategies. The council chamber grew quiet as the implications became clear. The plague was not just a weapon. It was a teacher, making itself more deadly with each victory. The humans are correct, Elder Velthara said slowly. This weapon grows stronger by feeding on failure. If we evacuate 50,000 humans and abandon Earth, the plague completes another lesson. The next world it attacks will face an even more perfect killer. Velnox's lights flickered with sudden understanding. You are suggesting we risk everything to stop a learning process that has been going on for decades. I am suggesting we have a chance to save more than just the humans, Velthara replied. We have a chance to prevent future genocides. On Earth's surface, the human team waited for an answer while continuing their preparations. In the underground laboratory, Dr. Lee Yuna worked without rest to refine their understanding of the plague's computer system. She had made another discovery, one that both thrilled and terrified her. The plague was not just learning from Earth. It was communicating with something else, sending regular data transmissions into deep space. It's reporting back, she explained to Dr. Kim Hwan over their secure communication link. Every few hours, it sends a compressed data package to coordinates outside our solar system. Park Min-ho looked up from his engineering calculations. The hegemony wants real-time updates on its weapons' progress. More than that, Yuna said. I think the plague might be part of a larger network. Multiple weapons on different worlds, all sharing information with each other. Dr. Choi Dae-ho stopped his quantum mechanics equations and stared at her. You're saying there might be dozens of these things operating simultaneously across the galaxy? Maybe hundreds, Yuna confirmed. All learning from each other, all becoming more perfect with every world they destroy. The scope of what they were facing began to sink in. This was not just about saving Earth. This was about stopping a galactic extermination program that had been running for generations. Hwan activated the emergency communication system that connected all of Earth's remaining command centers. All stations, this is Seoul Central. We need to share some new information with our Velkan allies immediately. Meanwhile, in the Velkan Council chamber, the debate continued. Some members argued for caution, pointing out that their species had survived for millions of years by avoiding unnecessary risks. Others argued for action, believing that some risks were worth taking to prevent greater tragedies. Fleet Commander Zexran presented the military perspective. Our ships are not warships. If this attempt fails and draws hegemony attention, we cannot defend ourselves effectively. But if we do nothing, countered Science Director Ixtala, the hegemony's weapon becomes unstoppable. Eventually, they will turn it against worlds in our own territory. The argument was interrupted by an urgent communication from Ambassador Kreltan's team on Earth. The humans had discovered the plague's communication network. Elder Velthara absorbed this new information with growing alarm. The light patterns along the Elder's body shifted to frequencies that spoke of deep concern mixed with rising determination. The scope is larger than we imagined, Velthara announced to the Council. This weapon system threatens the entire galaxy. We are not just choosing whether to help one species. We are choosing whether to take the first step towards stopping a cosmic genocide. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous. Nearly a third of the council members argued for immediate evacuation and withdrawal. They feared that attempting to fight the plague would only result in the destruction of both species. But the majority understood what the humans had shown them. This was not a problem that could be solved by running away. The plague would follow them eventually, armed with lessons learned from every world it had consumed. The humans will have our full cooperation, Elder Velthara declared. All medical stations will be placed at their disposal. Our quantum cores will be networked according to their specifications. And if they fail? Asked Velnox. Then we fail. Together, the Elder replied. But we fail while trying to save everyone, not just ourselves. The decision was transmitted to Earth within minutes. In the underground laboratory, the human team received the news with a mixture of relief and terror. They had gotten what they asked for, but now they had to deliver on their promises. 18 quantum cores, Minho reported, reading the technical specifications. More processing power than our entire civilization has ever possessed. We'll need all of it, Yuna said. She was looking at new data from the plague samples, data that showed just how complex their enemy really was. This thing has been learning for decades. Its memory contains the biological signatures of species we've never heard of. Dae-ho was already running calculations on how to network the Velkan systems. If we're going to hack something this sophisticated, we need to be smarter than every species it has ever encountered. No pressure, Hwan said with dark humor. But even as they joked, they all understood the magnitude of what lay ahead. They were about to attempt something that had never been tried before. They were going to fight a weapon that had never been defeated. And if they failed, both Earth and the Velkan fleet would be destroyed, leaving the galaxy defenseless against a plague that grew stronger with every victory. The countdown to their attempt had begun. In 9 days, they would either save their world or condemn it to certain destruction. But for the first time since the plague began, they were not fighting alone. The Velkan medical stations had never been designed to work together like this. Across 3 continents, 18 quantum cores hummed with alien energy as human engineers raced to connect them into a single massive network. Each core was the size of a building and contained technology that Earth science was only beginning to understand. Dr. Lee Yuna stood at the center of the primary control station in Seoul, surrounded by displays showing data streams from around the world. Her hands moved across holographic interfaces that had been hastily modified with human controls. Beside her, Vulcan technicians worked with patient precision to calibrate systems that had never been pushed to these limits. Connection established, with Station 7 in Brazil, reported Park Min-ho from his position at the communications console. That makes 15 cores online and stable. The Brazilian station had been the most difficult to connect. The plague had damaged much of South America's infrastructure, forcing teams to work through radioactive dead zones and areas where the very air was toxic. But somehow, human determination and Vulcan technology had found a way. Dr. Choi Daiho monitored the quantum readings with growing excitement. Resonance patterns are holding steady across all active cores. The network is more stable than our models predicted. But stability was only the first challenge. What they were attempting required more than just connecting the cores. They needed to create something that had never existed before. A hybrid system that combined Vulcan quantum processing with human intuitive programming. The plague's decision tree is enormous, Yuna explained to the mixed team of humans and Vulcans working around her. It contains behavioral patterns from hundreds of species, across dozens of worlds. We need to map all of it before we can begin to corrupt it. This was the critical phase. They had to understand their enemy completely before they could hope to defeat it. The plague was not just a biological weapon. It was an artificial intelligence that had been learning and evolving for decades. Ambassador Krell-Tan floated between the workstations, monitoring progress with careful attention. The Vulcan had become something like a bridge between the two species, translating not just languages, but entire ways of thinking about problems. Your approach is unlike anything in our databases, Krell-Tan observed as Yuna worked on the programming interface. You think in patterns we have not encountered before. Humans are good at finding solutions that shouldn't work, Yuna replied without looking up from her screens. Sometimes being illogical is exactly what you need. The plague samples in their containment field seemed to sense what was happening. They moved more aggressively now, pressing against the energy barriers that held them. It was as if the artificial intelligence knew it was being studied and did not like the attention. Connection established with Station 12 in Australia, Min-ho announced. 16 cores now online. Each new connection added exponentially to their processing power. But it also added to the complexity of keeping the network stable. The quantum cores were designed to work independently, not as part of a massive parallel system. We're approaching the theoretical limits of what these cores can handle, warned tech specialist Yextal, one of the Vulcan engineers. If we add much more processing load, the entire network could collapse. Daiho was running calculations as fast as his equipment would allow. We need at least 17 cores to have enough power for the final stage. Can the network handle one more connection? Only one way to find out, Yuna said. She activated the connection protocol for Station 17 in Antarctica. The displays around the control room flickered as massive amounts of data began flowing through the network. For a moment that seemed to last forever, nothing happened. Then the quantum resonance pattern stabilized and the network settled into a new configuration. 17 cores online and stable, Min-ho reported with obvious relief. We have enough processing power to begin the real work. But the real work was the most dangerous part of their plan. They had to create a false data packet sophisticated enough to fool an intelligence that had successfully adapted to hundreds of different worlds. The packet had to look like legitimate plague data, while actually containing instructions that would cause the weapon to destroy itself. Remember, Yuna said to her programming team, we get exactly one chance at this. The moment we introduce our countermeasure, the plague will either accept it or recognize it as an attack. If it recognizes the attack, it will adapt to prevent any future attempts. The hours stretched into days as the team worked to create their digital weapon. They had to think like the plague, while being careful not to think too much like it. The artificial intelligence was incredibly sophisticated, capable of detecting deception at levels no human could match. "The false data stream is ready," announced Dr. Ko Ji-won, one of the programmers who had joined them from the Busan Emergency Center. It should look like a standard progress report from a successful planetary conquest. But their creation was much more than a simple fake report. Hidden within the fabricated success data was something the plague had never encountered before. A logical paradox designed to exploit a weakness in its decision-making process. "The plague analyzes threats and adapts to counter them," Yuna explained to the assembled team. But what happens when it analyzes itself as a potential threat? The idea was elegantly simple and terrifyingly complex at the same time. They were going to convince the plague that it had encountered a more advanced version of itself. The weapon's own programming would then force it to destroy its current iteration to prevent competition. "Theoretical testing is complete," Daeho announced. "The logic bomb should propagate through the plague's entire network structure within hours of initial contact." But theory was one thing. Reality was something else entirely. They were dealing with an artificial intelligence that had been designed by species far more advanced than either humans or Vulcans. There was no guarantee their approach would work against such sophisticated programming. Ambassador Kreltan received regular updates from the Vulcan fleet orbiting above them. "Long-range sensors show increased activity in the outer system," the alien reported. "Something is monitoring our activities." The news sent a chill through the control room. The hegemony knew something was happening on Earth. Whether they understood exactly what the humans and Vulcans were attempting was unclear, but they were paying attention. "How long before they send ships to investigate?" Dr. Kim Hwan asked. "Unknown," Kreltan replied. "But our time is limited. If hegemony forces arrive before we complete our attempt, both our species will be at risk." The pressure was mounting from all directions. They had to succeed before the plague adapted beyond their ability to affect it. They had to succeed before the hegemony sent warships to stop them. And they had to succeed before their own improvised network collapsed under the strain of what they were asking it to do. "Final systems check in 30 minutes, Yuna announced. "After that we begin the actual attack sequence." Around her, humans and Vulcans worked side by side, preparing for a moment that would either save countless worlds or doom them all. The next few hours would determine whether their desperate alliance could accomplish something that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had declared impossible. In her containment field, a plague sample seemed to pulse with malevolent awareness. It knew something was coming, even if it did not yet understand what that something might be. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, fought not with weapons and armies, but with quantum processors and carefully crafted lies. And in that battle, the fate of the entire galaxy hung in the balance. The moment came at dawn, when Earth's artificial sunrise painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Dr. Lee Yuna stood before the primary control console, her finger hovering over the activation key. Around her, 18 quantum cores hummed. With barely contained power, their combined energy enough to light a small city. "All stations report ready," Park Min-ho announced from his position at the communications array. "Network stability is holding at 97%. Through the global communication system." Voices from around the world confirmed their readiness. Scientists in the frozen wastes of Antarctica, engineers in the ruins of London, technicians in the underground bunkers of Tokyo. Human and Vulcan teams had worked without sleep for the past 48 hours, knowing that timing would be everything. Dr. Choi Daeho watched the quantum resonance patterns on his displays. Energy levels are optimal. All cores are synchronized and ready for data injection. Ambassador Kreltan floated beside the central console, the alien's crystalline body pulsing with patterns that showed both hope and deep concern. "The fleet is monitoring from orbit. If the hegemony responds with force, we will do what we can to protect the operation." But everyone in the room knew that the Vulcan ships were medical vessels, not warships. If the galaxy's most powerful military force decided to stop them, there would be little the peaceful aliens could do. "Remember," Yuna said to her team, "the plague learns from every interaction. We have exactly one chance to fool it. If our deception fails, it will adapt to prevent any future attempts. She looked around the control room at the faces of the people who had chosen to risk everything on this desperate gamble. Humans and Velkans working together, each contributing their unique strengths to a plan that should have been impossible. Initiating. Attack sequence in 10 seconds, Una announced. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, execute. The quantum cores erupted with brilliant light as 18 medical stations simultaneously injected their false data stream into the plague's communication network. For a heartbeat that seemed to last forever, nothing visible happened. Then every screen in the control room exploded with information. Contact established, Deho shouted over the sound of humming machinery. The plague is accepting our data stream. It thinks it's receiving a legitimate update from another weapon. The displays showed cascading patterns of information as their carefully crafted deception worked its way through the plague's decision matrix. The artificial intelligence was analyzing the false data, comparing it to its own experiences, trying to understand what it was being told. Propagation rate is exceeding projections, reported Dr. Ko Jiwon from her programming station. The logic bomb is spreading through the network faster than we expected. But their creation was more than just a simple virus. Hidden within the fabricated success report was a piece of code designed to exploit a fundamental weakness in the plague's programming. They were convincing it that it had encountered a more advanced version of itself. Across Earth, the results were immediate and dramatic. The creeping death that had consumed continents began to slow, then stop, then reverse itself. In areas where the plague had been most active, the biological weapon started systematically destroying its own structures. "It's working," Minho called out, his voice cracking with exhaustion and disbelief. "Plague activity is dropping across all monitored zones. The weapon is terminating its own operations." In the containment fields around the laboratory, the plague, samples that had pulsed with malevolent intelligence just minutes before, now sat motionless. The artificial intelligence that had driven them was gone, convinced by the human's deception that it needed to eliminate itself to prevent competition. But the effects were not limited to Earth. Through their quantum network, they could see data, streams flowing outward at the speed of light, carrying their logic bomb to plague weapons on dozens of other worlds. Long-range sensors are detecting termination signals from multiple star systems, Ambassador Krelton reported, the alien's voice filled with something that might have been awe. The plague network is collapsing across the entire galaxy. Dr. Kim Hwan, who had been monitoring communications from the other emergency councils, looked up with tears in his eyes. Reports coming in from every continent. The plague is dying. All of it. Everywhere. The scope of what they had accomplished began to sink in. They had not just saved Earth. They had saved every world that the hegemony had marked for destruction. Species that had never heard of humans or Velkans were suddenly free from a threat they might never have known existed. But their success had not gone unnoticed. Hegemony response fleet detected at the edge of the solar system. Came the urgent transmission from the Velkan ships in orbit. 700 vessels and closing fast. Estimated arrival in 6 standard hours. The celebration in the control room died instantly. They had won the battle against the plague, but now they faced an even deadlier enemy. The hegemony's war fleet was coming to eliminate the species that had dared to destroy their ultimate weapon. Una stared at the tactical display showing the approaching ships. Each vessel was larger than anything Earth had ever built, armed with weapons that could crack planets and shielded with technology that made them nearly invulnerable. "We need to evacuate," Juan said quietly. "Get everyone to the Velkan ships and run." But something had changed in humanity during their desperate fight for survival. The species that had once fought among themselves over resources and territory had been forged into something new by their brush with extinction. "No," Una said firmly. "We're not running. The Velkans gave us the tools to save not just ourselves but dozens of other worlds. We owe it to those species to stand and fight." Minho was already calling up engineering specifications on his displays. "The quantum cores are still active. If we can modify them, turn them into weapons instead of medical devices." "The Velkan technology was never designed for combat," Krelton protested. "We are a peaceful species. Our ships have no weapons, our systems are not built for war. Then we'll have to teach them, Deho said with grim determination. The same way we taught the plague to destroy itself. As the hegemony fleet approached, humanity prepared for a battle that would determine not just their own fate, but the future of every free species in the galaxy. They had already accomplished the impossible once by turning a weapon of mass destruction against itself. Now they would have to do something even more impossible: transform a peaceful alien medical fleet into a force capable of standing against the galaxy's most powerful military confederation. The real test of their alliance with the Vulcans was about to begin. The transformation of Earth began immediately. Within hours of the plague's defeat, every surviving human facility was converted into a weapons factory. The same desperate energy that had driven them to hack the galaxy's most sophisticated biological weapon now focused on an even more impossible task: turning peaceful medical technology into instruments of war. Dr. Lee Yuna had not slept in 36 hours, but she felt more awake than she had in months. In the Sol Command Center, she worked alongside Vulcan engineers to redesign their quantum medical cores into something the galaxy had never seen before. The healing matrices can be reversed, she explained to Ambassador Krell-Tan as her fingers danced across holographic displays. Instead of repairing cellular damage, they can disrupt molecular bonds. Instead of strengthening organic tissue, they can destabilize artificial hulls. The Vulcan's light patterns showed deep uncertainty. Our technology has never been used to cause harm. We do not know if such modifications are even possible. Everything is possible, Park Min-ho called from his engineering station. We just proved that by destroying a weapon that was supposed to be indestructible. Around the globe, similar conversations were taking place. Human creativity was combining with Vulcan technology to create weapons that neither species could have imagined alone. The quantum cores that had networked to defeat the plague were being repurposed into planetary defense systems. But their most audacious project was still taking shape in Dr. Choi Deho's theoretical physics lab. He had discovered something remarkable about the plague's communication network. It had left behind an infrastructure that humanity could use. The plague created quantum communication channels to every world it attacked, Deho explained to the Emergency Council. Those channels are still active. We can use them to send more than just data. Dr. Kim Hwan understood immediately. You want to weaponize information itself. Not just information, Deho replied. Instructions, technical specifications. Complete blueprints for everything we've learned about fighting the hegemony. The plan was breathtaking in its scope. Instead of just defending Earth, they would teach every oppressed species in the galaxy how to build their own weapons. The hegemony had ruled through superior technology and overwhelming force. Humanity would respond by making that technology available to everyone. The transmission would have to be massive, Yuna observed. Complete engineering databases, manufacturing instructions, tactical manuals. We're talking about uploading our entire scientific knowledge to the galaxy. And it would have to happen before the hegemony fleet arrives, Minho added. Once they're in range, they'll jam all communications. They had 4 hours. The work began immediately. Every human database was stripped for useful information. Vulcan medical knowledge was combined with human engineering principles to create weapons that could be built by any species with basic industrial capabilities. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The plague, in its final moments before destruction, had transmitted something back to its creators. Not the usual progress report, but a complete analysis of why it had failed. The hegemony knows exactly how we defeated their weapon, Krell-Tan reported from the communications station. They know about our alliance, our technology, our methods. Good, Yuna said with a smile that would have terrified her enemies. Then they'll know we're coming. The transmission began 90 minutes before the hegemony fleet reached Earth. Quantum signals raced across the galaxy at faster-than-light speeds, carrying a message that would change the course of history. Not a plea for help or a warning of danger, but a gift of knowledge that would make resistance possible. To the slave worlds of the hegemony's core territories, humanity sent the blueprints for quantum disruptors that could disable their masters' ships. To the mining colonies in the outer rim, they transmitted the specifications for shields that could protect entire planets. To the agricultural worlds that fed the hegemony's armies, they provided the knowledge to build weapons that could turn farming equipment into instruments of liberation. Transmission complete, Deho announced as the last data packet disappeared into space. Every oppressed world in the galaxy now has access to our complete technical database. The hegemony fleet arrived to find Earth defended by weapons they had never encountered before. The medical stations that had once treated human plague victims now fired beams of coherent quantum energy that could dissolve starship hulls like acid. The communication arrays that had coordinated the global resistance now projected defensive fields that turned incoming missiles into harmless light. But the real surprise came from space itself. As the hegemony ships moved into attack formation, reports began flooding their communication channels. Slave worlds were rising in rebellion. Mining colonies were destroying their tribute shipments. Agricultural planets were declaring independence. The galaxy was in revolt, and every rebel had access to weapons that matched or exceeded hegemony technology. Admiral Vexmore of the hegemony fleet found himself facing an impossible situation. His orders were to destroy Earth and eliminate the species that had corrupted their plague weapon. But with rebellions breaking out across hundreds of worlds, he could not spare the forces for a protracted siege. The humans have turned our own infrastructure against us, his tactical officer reported. They used the plague's communication network to spread rebellion across our entire territory. The first battle was brief and decisive. Earth's improvised defenses, powered by quantum cores that had been designed to heal rather than harm, proved surprisingly effective against ships that had been built to intimidate rather than fight desperate enemies. When the hegemony fleet retreated, it left behind more than just damaged ships. It left behind the wreckage of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for centuries through fear and superior technology. Within weeks, the revolution had spread to every corner of hegemony space. Species that had been enslaved for generations suddenly found themselves free, armed with weapons that their former masters could not counter. Ambassador Krelton stood once again on the surface of Earth, but the world had been transformed. Where cities had once lain in ruins, new structures rose that combined human engineering with Vulcan aesthetics. The orange sky had cleared to show stars that no longer held terror, but promise. Your species asked us for help during your darkest hour, Krelton said to Dr. Yuna as they watched construction crews building a monument to the alliance between their peoples. In return, you have given the galaxy something it had almost forgotten. What's that? Yuna asked. Hope, the Vulcan replied, and the knowledge that those who help others will always be helped in return. The transformation was complete. Humanity had evolved from refugees seeking salvation to teachers showing others how to save themselves. They had repaid their debt to the Vulcans not just with gratitude, but with revolution. And across the galaxy, on worlds that had never heard of Earth, before the Great Transmission, species looked up at their stars with new dreams of freedom. They sang songs of the humans who had shared their knowledge freely, of the Vulcans who had risked everything to help strangers, and of the day when the galaxy learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from cooperation, the we. Universe had indeed been shaken, not by weapons or threats, but by the simple revolutionary idea that help freely given would always be repaid in ways that transformed everything it touched. In the end, the hegemony's greatest weapon had become the foundation for their greatest defeat, and the species they had marked for extinction had become the teachers of their liberation.